Hi and welcome to the real work of WeightChoice. This week we begin to get a really clear idea of exactly what it is that we're putting in our mouth, how that gets in the way of our weight goals, and an actual clear idea of the kind of eating habits that we will have when we've completed the WeightChoice program. Not because we've used willpower, not because we've deprived ourselves of anything, but because our tastes have quite genuinely changed and we simply do not want that stuff anymore and we are absolutely free of it. Now, if you haven't already, please stop this video right now and go and print off the handout for the video because, as I promised, it's interactive and I'll be asking you to do things throughout this video. So stop the video now and go and grab that handout, come back and press play and let's continue. So what percentage of the population do you think is actually overweight or obese? Have a little think about that, and maybe you know already. In Australia, it's actually about 63%, but it's still rising. And unfortunately, in my state, Western Australia, the average is over 73% and still rising. It tends to be worse in regional areas, and that's much the same right across the world. So this is a really, really big problem that up till now has not been solved. What is the direct medical cost of overweight obesity? So we're talking about medical treatment and hospitalizations, etc., directly caused by overweight obesity. In Australia alone, it's over $2 billion every year. Worldwide goes into many, many billions, and that it doesn't even begin to touch the lost productivity and other costs of overweight obesity. What are some of the diseases and the disorders caused directly by overweight? We have heart disease and stroke. Several types of cancer are directly attributable to being overweight. So endometrial cancer, breast cancer, ovarian, prostate, liver, gallbladder, kidney, and colon cancer. Diabetes type 2 is a direct result of being overweight. Only in this morning's newspaper, I was reading about record numbers of people having limbs amputated because of diabetes. So this is something we definitely want to avoid. Also, musculoskeletal problems are notorious. So people develop arthritis because there's so much pressure on joints and on tendons, and also osteoarthritis as a result of being overweight. Chronic kidney disease because of the load on the kidneys and likewise the liver. Bowel disease. Back and neck pain and disability is very, very common when people are overweight. Also, depression is associated with overweight, as is disrupted sleep, and even Alzheimer's is more prevalent in people who are overweight. So these are all terribly serious diseases or disorders that directly impact on people's quality of life and also can quite substantially shorten people's lives. So the mortality rate, in fact, from overweight and obesity is the second highest cause of death following smoking and inactivity. So in the last week, we've had you send in photos of every single thing that you've eaten or anything at all that you'd had to drink, and we've asked you to calculate the calories as accurately as you possibly can on those. So are we saying that weight loss is about calorie counting? Come on, be honest. I'm sure you were thinking, oh, come on, Weight Watchers did this to me, or someone else did this to me. This is just calorie counting like that. I assure you it absolutely isn't. So it is not about calorie counting. The whole purpose of this week was for you and for us to know exactly what's in the food that you are putting in your mouth. Otherwise, we're eating blind and we have no idea where to start in order to help you. So we need to know where you are before we can begin to plot a path away from that and to free you from those things forever. So how many calories do you need to stay where you are? There's a website here and I'd like you to go to it now. So stop this video once you're on it. I want you to go there and you'll see the chart. So come back to me when you've got that chart in front of you. So on that chart, I want you to choose sedentary as your exercise level. Why is that? Because the most up-to-date research indicates exercise makes little to no difference to your weight. See, for years now, we've had governments and doctors and health professionals telling us, eat less, move more. And it turns out the move more is actually pretty irrelevant when it comes to weight loss. We can see that where people exercise, their appetite tends to increase and they do tend to eat more, which negates the whole purpose of the exercise if we were looking at it as a weight loss exercise. In addition to that, people compensate for exercise by being less active the rest of the day. So the overall net impact of exercise on fat burning is zero. Should you not worry about exercise at all? Absolutely not, because exercise is crucial to our health and our well-being. And in fact, if you are inactive, that's an even bigger health risk that carries an even bigger mortality rate than being overweight or obese. So it's incredibly important to do some kind of exercise, preferably on a daily basis, but it's got to be fun. It's got to be something that you actually enjoy. Otherwise, there's no point because it's not sustainable. So on that calculator, put in your current weight, choose sedentary, choose your gender, of course, and your height, and then calculate the number of calories that you need to stay exactly where you are. And on page 2 of your handout, write that in. Next, calculate the number of calories that you need to maintain your ideal weight. So put in your ideal weight, leave everything else unchanged, and see how many calories you would need to be eating each day in order to maintain that ideal weight. So the question is, when you look at what you've been eating over the last week, how close were you to the calories that you need to maintain your ideal weight? What kind of changes in terms of the types of food that you eat or the quantities of food that you eat do you need to make? Where do you need us to help you to focus so that you know where to turn away from? We can give you the techniques to do that so that it's at an unconscious level. You don't have to use willpower. You simply don't really want that food anymore. Now, your speed of weight loss is a choice. We don't call it weight choice for nothing. So on that little chart that you just filled in, you can see what your calorie count would need to come in at if you wanted to lose, say, a half a kilo, 500 grams per week. And that's really about the maximum that we suggest. For some people, they will not be able to reduce their calories enough to reduce at that rate. And I'm one of them. I'm quite a small person. And if I reduced my calories in order to cut half a kilo a week, I would be down well below 1,000 calories, which is not enough to maintain good nutrition. So some people have to be happy with a very slow rate of loss, and that is perfectly okay. So it's not a race. Now, there are some exceptions to slow weight loss. For instance, if most people were to just have the amount of calories that were required to maintain their ideal weight, they would eventually get to that ideal weight, but they do it at the same rate as they put it on. So if it took them 5 years to amass all that extra weight, it will take them about that time to lose it all over again. And I don't have a problem with that, but a lot of us like to have results very fast, and we want to have much faster weight loss than that. Now, An exception to that slow pace would be if someone has been eating, for instance, massive amounts of chocolate every day or massive amounts of alcohol every day, and you quite suddenly reduce that because you just don't want it anymore. That represents a giant calorie deficit for you, and you might not notice a lot of difference for 2 to 4 weeks, but after that you would notice the weight beginning to fall off all by itself, and quite dramatically. So I'm going to ask you to guess the calories in this food content. I told you it would be interactive, so I want you to give good thought to this. So in a glass of wine, how many calories do you think might be there? You know, and I'm basing this on 175 calories because that's 175 milliliters, because that's what generally will get served up to you in a restaurant. A standard glass is 125, but a lot of us at home have much more than that. You know, we might fill a large glass, a bucket, almost up to the brim and call that a glass. But this is 175 mil, right? And it is 120 to 160 calories, which, you know, for me as a small person, that is nearly 10% of my daily energy requirements. So it makes a big hole in the energy count for the day. Now, what about a cappuccino? This is a small cup here, but lots of us will go and have a large cappuccino, a large takeaway cappuccino, or in a mug, especially if we're going to business meetings through the day. It's just handy to have, tasty, gives us something to do while we're chatting. Now, I've been horrified at the calorie count of cappuccinos. I was not that long ago up at a coffee franchise, and I looked up the wall at a large cappuccino, and to my horror, it was over 500 calories, which is half, or just a little bit less than half, of my daily requirements. Now, I've spoken to business people who might be having 3 to 6 of these a day, and that is more than they need to sustain them just in coffee. So we need to be really careful about these hidden calories and things that we would never have suspected would have that impact. What about smoothies? Now, people talk about smoothies as a health food, but are they really? You know, if you're making it up to a recipe where they're guaranteeing you that it is low cal, you know, like under 300, they certainly should be well under 300. But if they have banana or yogurt or dried fruit or nuts or seeds, they are going to be crazy big on the calorie count. And I have seen smoothies easily exceed 600 calories, which is almost your whole day's requirement in just one smoothie. So they are not necessarily healthy whatsoever. And you know, when you drink your calories in liquid form, they pass through the stomach really quickly. The stomach empties and you'll get hunger signals again. So it's not necessarily the wisest way to take your calories in. Now, what about these convenience savers? You get them in bottles, you get them in cans, you get them in plastic containers, and they're really handy because you just whack them into some pasta or toss them on top of a stir fry, and voila, you have the family meal for the evening. The problem is that these sauces, almost without exception, are absolutely loaded in sugar, if not in fats and creams as well. So many of them are well over 500 calories that you add to the meal. What about a good old fish and chip fry-up? You know, there is nothing wrong with having a great big greasy fry-up once in a blue moon. The problem is when this stuff forms a regular part of your diet, like once a week even, is way too much. So in your usual fish and chips, one person serve, that can go over 1,300 calories in just one meal. What about takeaway Chinese or takeaway Indian? That can easily exceed 1,500 calories. And of course, pizza, just 3 slices, can easily exceed 1,800 calories. So I'm not saying that these foods are bad, I'm just saying they're once in a blue moon foods. Now, what about good old Tim Tams? So many people list this as their favourite biscuit. One Tim Tam has 97 calories. But who stops at 1? I've talked to lots of people who will sit and eat an entire packet one after the other, and they just can't stop until they're all gone. How many do you think are in a whole packet? It's 1,035. There's my whole day gone right there. What about mashed potato? Mashed potato can be lovely with a meal. And, 1 cup of it with just a little bit of milk, no butter at all, is 237 calories all by itself. That's almost a whole meal's worth right there. And you add 102 calories for every tablespoon of butter that you put into your mashed potato. So mashed potato, absolutely yum, great for soaking up sauces when you've got a nice casserole to go with it, but it's something that you would not have regularly. Creamy pastas are very, very popular, and people will look at a dish like this and they'll see there's pasta and look at all those yummy vegetables, how healthy. But the minute you add cream or butter to these kinds of meals, you get calorie overload. So a creamy pasta, without even counting the meat or the veg, comes in at around 350. So by the time you put the meat and vegetables in there, you could easily double that, which is pretty heavy for a single meal. Even for your main meal of the day, that's really getting up there. Now, interestingly, when you go to a restaurant, they won't give you just half a cup of pasta, half a cup of cooked pasta, which is the correct portion size, by the way. A restaurant will serve you 4 times that amount. They will give you at least 2 cups of cooked pasta. And that dish will easily come in at 1,500 to 2,000 calories. So if you're dining out, having lots of business meetings, for example, you could be taking in a mammoth amount of calories and wondering why you're putting on weight. A couple of sausages, 300 calories. So without even counting your veggies or your mash that you might have that, with that 300 calories all by themselves, because they tend to be quite fatty. Now, lots of people have Milo through the day as a nice little pick-me-up or snack instead of tea or coffee. A cup of Milo, water only, no sugar, no milk. How many calories do you think is in that? And a cup of white tea or white coffee is about 15 calories. So how many calories do you think is in Milo? It's actually 60 calories for Milo made on water only versus 15 if you were having a cup of white tea or a cup of white coffee with low-fat milk. And of course, when you add milk and sugar to that Milo, it becomes 259 calories, which is pretty close to a meal's worth of energy right there. So you can see why it's so important to go through this exercise of understanding what is actually in the food that you're eating, and therefore understanding what kinds of foods you want to keep in as a habit and what kinds of food you want to lose as a habit. There's no point doing this by willpower, so please don't start depriving yourself of any of these foods. If you really love them, please keep having them. But we're going to be showing you some techniques that you can use to actually eliminate them from your unconscious preferences so that you're no longer drawn to them and you're drawn to other things instead. So this is our promise, to turn you from a person who has the feelings and the thoughts and the actions of an overweight person to someone who naturally and easily has the feelings and thoughts and behaviours of a naturally slim, healthy person. So we're doing this because you change, not because you're forcing yourself to make changes. So if you don't really have an accurate idea of what's in the food that you're eating, please Google it. You can just Google how many calories in X, and it'll be right there on the screen. It's very, very easy. It won't take long before you'll have a crystal clear idea of what's normal and what's not. And you know, when it comes to complex foods like casseroles and soups, stir fries, you can still get a pretty accurate idea because you know the ingredients. And you can get the calories for the ingredients and then divide by portion. So what does a normal plate look like? If you turn to page 3 now of your handout, you'll see the representation of what should be a normal plate. And basically it's saying that your green and red and orange vegetables should take up at least half of your plate. They're the main part of your plate. A quarter of the plate should be things like potatoes or rice or pasta or couscous. And a quarter of your plate should be protein, such as meat, fish or poultry. Now, my own preference is to have a half of the plate full of greens because I love my greens and they're really good for me. And a half of my plate made up with the potatoes sometimes, rice sometimes, meat and fish or poultry. I don't always have the potatoes or rice or pasta. Sometimes it's really just the greens and the meat because that's really all I want. So what do normal portions look like? Well, if you look at the other handout, which shows you the secret to serving sizes is in your hand, this is a way of working out portions so that you're not calorie counting, you're not working out points, you're getting used to judging your food by eye. Now, again, I'm not saying to deprive yourself of food. If you want more than this, if you really want more than this, you must have it. Because if you force yourself to do it by willpower, you're kidding yourself that you're making any progress. So this is merely what you're aiming at. This is how you can benchmark your progress. Okay, so let's get on to the subject of food waste now, because it came to my attention some time ago that many people are throwing out up to 75% of the food that they pay good money for each and every week. And the stats on this, and by the way, in your handout, I've got the references for this information, so you know I'm not just pulling it out of my head. It's actually data, and it's been verified from several sources, including government data. So this is absolutely accurate, as horrifying as it is. So just in Australia, in one country alone, we throw out $8 billion worth of food every year. It's mostly, believe it or not, fresh food like fruits and vegetables and meats. That's 450,000 garbage truck loads of food that went off because we didn't plan how to use it. It's like emptying your fridge and throwing it away 3 times every year. So planning strategies will get around this. It will not only cut your waste almost completely, it will not only save a fortune in shopping, up to 75% of your shopping bill every week, it will also save up to 75% of your shopping time and your preparation time. It'll save your stress and it will make life so much easier, I promise. So what I would like you to do now is turn to page 5 of your handout. Now, this is an actual copy of what I did this week, and I do this every single week because I hate to say I'm lazy. I like to say I'm efficient, but really I just hate wasting time. I hate cooking, I hate shopping, and I just want to make it as easy on myself and on the family as I possibly can. Plus, I'm a bit of a Scrooge. You know, I really resent wasting money on food. So this is my planning, and you can see I take an A4 sheet, I whack a line down the centre, and then I put the days of the week and I plan my meals. And you can see all of these look pretty healthy. The ones alongside, the ones that have an asterisk alongside, they're the ones that I'm pulling out of the freezer, almost all or whole. For instance, on Saturday, you can see I've got beef casserole with an asterisk. So that comes out of the freezer, but I'm going to make the mash and the vegetables, which will be greens, most likely broccoli or whatever my husband, who does the shopping, saw at the supermarket that looked like a nice fresh green in season. So also with the mushroom soup, that's in the freezer, but the poppadoms, I'm going to make them in the microwave because they take exactly 45 seconds. The Spanish chicken is in the freezer, but I'm going to cook the rice fresh and the greens fresh. Sometimes I've got the rice in the freezer as well. See, what I do is when I cook anything that I know is freezable, I don't just make one meal. I never just make one meal. I'll make 2 meals or 4 meals or 8 meals, and I'll label them and stick them in the freezer. We also, we're maybe a bit anal, we keep an index of what's in the freezer, because if you're like me, if you don't have that index, you forget what you've put in there, and you go to the freezer and everything's on top of one another, and how do you find anything? It's really frustrating, and I can't stand frustration. I can't stand wasting time. So we've got this handwritten index, and we just cross it off as we go. So I aim every week to have nights as many nights as possible, where I am not cooking, or I'm cooking very little because I'm pulling it out of the freezer. So once I've got my menu designed, then I'll make my list of ingredients on the left-hand side, and that list of ingredients will have added to it what I want for my lunches or any snacks. So on that list of ingredients, ignore the Worcester sauce and the brown vinegar, because my husband likes to make his own biltong, and they are ingredients for making biltong, so they are not in my menu. I don't like his biltong, so I'd never put it on my menu. And you can see they're 3-minute noodles. Now, I quite like 3-minute noodles for my lunch because they are so fast, and it's so easy to chop up some baby tomatoes and some herbs, and put olives in, or a bit of tuna or salmon or chicken or whatever I want, in order to make a super fast but also super low calorie meal. And if you've seen my food posts in our Facebook support group, you'll see that a lot of my meals come in at under 250, and the 3-minute noodles do that for me. I love them. I find it really filling, really satisfying. So that's one of my meals. I also love to have a quarter of an avocado on toast, no butter, with some chili flakes over it. So that's another one of my lunches. So I plan for those things so that they're there. I never get to a point where it's lunchtime and I think, what can I have? I know exactly what's there. I know exactly what I'm going to have. So many people in the WeightChoice program have shared that at work they haven't brought anything, they're hungry, and so they'll have something unhealthy like the biscuits that are in the tea room, or they'll hop to the fast food store next door and get a Nando's or a fish and chips or a takeaway that is practically their whole day requirements just in that one meal. So this planning is terribly important in order to cut waste, save a heap of money, save a heap of time and stress, and make your life easier, and help you to eat well without having to stress over it. So it just happens naturally. So I hope that you've enjoyed this. I really look forward to your questions. If you would like to discuss planning, shopping, cooking, calories, hop onto the support group and let's have a chat. Talk soon.